Hello, welcome to this first lesson of the module on value perception and price sensitivity, where we'll explore how to quantify the value perceived by customers. In the previous lesson, we saw that the value that can be captured in the market depends on understanding customer needs, creating solutions to meet those needs, communicating the value, and convincing the customer to pay for it. But how do customers make decisions? They do so based on their level of value perception and price sensitivity. But what exactly are these two concepts? Let's look at an example. If we asked 100 people which car they think is better between a BMW and an economic sedan, the vast majority would probably choose the BMW due to its brand prestige, advanced technology, comfort, etc. But if a BMW is clearly better, why are more economy sedans sold in most emerging countries like those in Latin America? Although most people may believe the BMW is better, not everyone has the ability or willingness to pay for it. This ability to pay is known as price sensitivity, and it is just as important as value perception in determining the purchase decision. In this lesson, we'll focus on understanding how perceived value can be quantified in order to arrive at the price of a product or service. There are two methodologies to do this. One is total economic value, and the other is total perceived value. Total economic value is used when the product or service attributes can be objectively quantified in economic terms, such as efficiency, durability, resistance, etc. Total perceived value is used when the attributes cannot be economically quantified, or at least the calculation differs from one customer to another, such as in the case of brand, design, taste, and so on. Let's look at an example of how these two methods are different yet complementary. A few years ago, a young man knocked on my door offering a water saving product, which, when applied to the toilet, would turn the water blue and give off a pleasant scent in order to avoid flushing and thus save water. Each bottle cost $4.50 and lasted for 250 uses. At my home, each flush used 6 liters of water, and the cost of water and sewage was zero point 0.2 cents per liter. Multiplying those values, I calculated a total savings of $3 per bottle. Since there were no other advantages or disadvantages compared to not using the product, the savings represented the total economic value. But in order for the product to be attractive, its price must be lower than total economic value. In this case, since the price of $4.50 was higher than the total economic value, I didn't find the product appealing and decided not to buy it. The young man then asked me to consider other aspects beyond water savings, such as the pleasant scent and the environmental benefits. Since those aspects were not easy to quantify, I mentally used the other methodology, the total perceived value. I belonged to a customer segment that assigned value to attributes like brand, ease of use, scent, disinfection, and environmental care in the way shown here. I compared the water saving product with the disinfectant we use at home, rating each attribute on a scale from 1 to 3, where 3 was the highest score and 1 the lowest. In this way, the disinfectant we use at home received a weighted score of 2.8, while the water-saving product scored 2.0. If the price of the disinfectant for an equivalent size was $1.75, what should be the fair price for the water-saving product considering its lower perceived value? Using a simple rule of three, the price would be $1.25, although in future lessons we'll see that the correct calculation is a bit more complex. By combining the economic value from water savings with the perceived value of the other attributes, I concluded that the maximum price I was willing to pay was $4.25, still less than the $4.50 the young man was charging. This confirmed my decision not to buy the product. But which attributes should be considered when conducting a perceived value quantification analysis? On the one hand, we must consider functional attributes which relate to the performance of the solution. We must also consider emotional attributes, which are associated with the brand and what it inspires when the customer buys or uses the solution. Finally, we must consider relational attributes, which are related to services that complement the main solution. Keep in mind that customer needs vary depending on the usage occasion. And since this affects the quantification of perceived value, it also impacts price calculation. We have now seen how to use perceived value quantification to calculate the maximum price a customer would be willing to pay for a product or service. But how does price sensitivity influence the customer's final decision? That's what we'll explore in the next lesson, where we'll discuss the factors that influence customer price sensitivity.